Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Sascha Mayer, CEO and co-founder of Mamava, and mom to two teenagers. In this episode, we talk about the challenges and benefits of growing and running a company while raising kids, her preference to the preteen and teen years over the toddler years, and the lessons her kids are learning by watching her chase her passion. Sascha likes to joke that Mamava was an overnight success that took 10 years, and we chat about how to get started in pursuing your dreams. Welcome to the This Is Parenting podcast, a show devoted to sharing the roller coaster journey of parenthood from moms and dads all over the world. I'm your host, Andrea Rhodes. Information and show notes about today's episode can be found at thisisparentingpodcast.com. Let's get started.
I'm Sascha Mayer. I am the CEO and co-founder of Mamava, and we make lactation suites, and then we have a mobile app that helps moms find them and access them and connect to each other. But first off, I have a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, and I live in Burlington, Vermont, or actually outside of Burlington, Vermont, and sort of balancing that role of parenting still and parenting older kids, which is a little more complicated and I think more fun than the little kids, and growing a business. So I would say, our business is kind of going through puberty and my two kids are as well.
That is awesome. All right. I have a lot of follow-up questions because you are in such a unique position with where your kids are at in their life as well as your business. They really are kind of running in parallel. And I'm trying to figure out how you're doing it. Like we chatted about before we got started, a lot of the parents that follow me have younger kids. So we want to grasp as much wisdom from those of you who are there before us and kind of in the trenches. Tell us a little bit about those preteen and teen years and what can we kind of expect as we start to kind of transition out of the toddler years and that early childhood days. What are we in for here?
Well, I was saying that I really prefer to have the older kids because they just become more interesting and they force you to stretch yourself. I learn so much from my kids and am constantly amazed at how much they are their own people. And as a sociologist by background and sort of a marketer by trade, just understanding how they're interacting with the world and how they consume it, frankly, is really interesting to me. So, right now, it's a lot about them teaching me, which is great. And especially in this era where there are constantly churning new media platforms, to hear and see what they're using or what they're listening to in terms of music, or interested in terms of social media platforms has been really great. Of course, on the flip side of that, the constant battle around screen time, which I know parents of all age kids are grappling with, is a true issue. And I'm not sure if I quite have answers besides in our household, there's a lot of cold turkey because it's a cracked open door just opens the floodgates to being on a screen. And that can be a real problem. And
so it sounds like you are pretty engaged with the actions that your kids are taking in the online world or in the tech world, just kind of how they're interacting with the environment around them. I would love to dive into that a little bit more. And with your background, being an entrepreneur and having your own business, it's so much more important for you to be tuned in to that scene than maybe an average parent would be. You might be just a little bit more turned on to that. So I would love to know how you're doing that. Are your kids just willingly coming to you and be like, Mom, this new platform is amazing. You need to figure this out. Like, how are you having these conversations, without annoying your kids or, being up in their business all the time?
Well, it frankly is really more observational. One of the things that I think is interesting, I would say particularly for my daughter, but I think who's younger and for my son as well, is how comfortable they are presenting themselves in the world, because they are on Snapchat or Instagram and doing obviously selfies, but also presenting their work, often school assignments, having them present via a video because they can, and the composure they have, because they're always used to being on a screen, and the facility they have with the technology kind of blows my mind, because it still isn't comfortable for me. Even a video chat still, for somebody of my generation, feels awkward. And I have seen it translate to how they present themselves in the world. So I know we hear a lot about social media and the screens creating isolation. For my kids, I think it's actually made them bolder in the real world as well. Maybe not always for good, but my daughter, for instance, is into theater. And I think that she has comfort being in front of people and memorizing lines because she is presenting herself on social media a lot. And I would say the same for my son. They just have a different level of confidence. I think I could point to the Parkland kids and how I think it really came out, or after that tragedy, that how composed they were with presenting their point of view, to millions of people on camera. And I could, sort of is evidence that comfort can lead to really positive activism and connection making.
That is super interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything about that. I mean, I definitely have had discussions around the positives of social media, the positives of screen time. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about how much confidence that can give someone just because of their use of it. Just the amount of time that you're in front of other people and in front of yourself, seeing yourself, you will inherently get better at it. It's like Toastmasters or a speech class, like every day.
I think that's what I've seen with them, and it's something that I'm not naturally that confident with. So I am looking to them. How do you do that? On the flip side, one of the things I've been talking about with my son, both the kids, and I think so many kids now have this Chromebook, which is a connection back to all of their curriculum work at school. Of course, a Chromebook is a gateway to YouTube and, everything on the internet. So for my son, who tends to be more easily distracted by screens and is just a click away from something that isn't the schoolwork or the Khan Academy, and that's a real challenge. I've talked to him about it, and said, it's like having an AA meeting in a bar. So if you're addicted to screens, or if that's a challenge for you, but the gateway to all of your work, your assignments, the labs you're doing with your other students is through the screen. How does a young person manage that? And we have not figured that out at all. It's either you can have access, or they have to be completely off. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground that we've been able to manage in our household.
And that's tough too, because if you tell him to turn it off, then he can't do his work. So at some point,
exactly. Or I'm learning a piece of music and I need to find the notes, or I'm using the calculator on my phone for my math assignment. So it's crazy. It's hard to, and unfortunately in that way, I think they're guinea pigs, right? First generation that's really having to grow up with it, and we don't know what's going to come out the other end.
I was just getting ready to say that you are parenting the first kind of group that's going to have to deal with it and grapple with it. And I do wonder with my kids who have started with screens, if they are able to turn it off because it's like, meh, to be there when I get home. Like, I wonder if it being around them so much that they become desensitized to it and it's just not a big deal anymore. I don't know.
That's a really good point, actually, especially with this new recommendations that have come out from the World's Health Organization about, no screen time at all under 2. But maybe you're right. Maybe it'll be like air and water, that there won't be this addictive quality to it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it probably always goes back to, it depends on the kid, right? It depends on the family. I know with and I've said on the podcast before, within my own family, my 7-year-old has a harder time regulating it, and my 4-year-old can just go on with her business. She can be on the screen for half an hour and then just turn it off on her own, and she self-regulates and doesn't care. She is just not driven by it perhaps, or because maybe she got on the screens much earlier than my son did just because her brother was around it. And I can't not, they're in the same room. So that was much harder for me to keep them out of her hands. So maybe, again, she literally grew up with them. And so maybe she just doesn't really give a shit about it. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I think, and it could be a gender thing that's the same with mine. My son is more compelled by it, and my daughter, she can go forever and just be reading books, and then she might get sucked into something that's video, but for the most part, she can live without it. It's interesting.
Well, I'll check back in with you in maybe 5 or 6 years and see how it all turned out.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into your entrepreneurial career with Mamava. I think that's really, really such an interesting story. And for those of you who followed my blog and follow me on Facebook, I chatted with Sascha and your other co-founder, and I just love what Mamava stands for and what they are trying to do to help women find a safe place to do something so natural. It needs to be done, but I love your mission. I love what you're doing. So I want to kind of go back to the beginning of when you decided that this was something you wanted to pursue, and you do have a family, and starting a business is not for the faint of heart. So tell me a little bit about how you made that transition, you made that decision, and how that impacted you as a mom.
Well, I can say, I like this expression, you can have it all, but you can't have it all right now. I think that's really true in life, especially when you have young kids. Christine, my co-founder, and I had the special privilege of being able to incubate the Mamava business within another business, within this design studio where we both worked. I wasn't moonlighting like you are, or I didn't have that same pressure because of that. With that said, we did have a slower, I think, trajectory because our client work came first. And when we had lulls in that business, we could focus more on developing what Mamava eventually became. So even though, my kids are 13 and 15, as I mentioned, and this is an idea that struck me, obviously, when I was breastfeeding. So that took many years for it to be conceived of, kind of get funded, get off the ground. And it has now grown to a place where I'm able to focus, obviously solely on the Mamava business. So I guess the point that said, it's, we're an overnight success in 10 years, right? When it really comes down to it. And I think for entrepreneurs, understanding that sometimes it takes time, sometimes that it's a matter of your world and your life having the ability to focus on something, an entrepreneurial project, but sometimes it's also culture. For us, it positively, we talk about our business as kind of riding this wave of, first there was the health and wellness and our own personal experiences and wanting to solve the problem. And then with legislation that mandated that people had to provide lactation rooms, there was compliance and the business case was made. And then there's the Time's Up movement, right? And we've been tapping into all of that to help propel and strengthen the business. And, that's all about timing. And there's the timing that happens about your home life and your parenting life. And then there's a timing that happens around career and the cultural world. You might be trying to fit your entrepreneurial, or put your business venture into. So I think as far as advice is just being sensitive to all of those dynamics. And I can say it's easier to do what I'm doing with older kids. I don't have to be concerned about, how they're getting home from school or how they're getting to their practices or the health and well-being that it takes to nurture a younger child. It takes other energy, a different emotional energy for older kids, but that's definitely important to note that I can do what I'm doing now because the kids are older and I have a great partner. My husband is actually a teacher, so he's very well suited to be managing and supporting the family when I don't have the same bandwidth to do that.
Do you feel that your kids are kind of aware of your entrepreneurial journey? I kind of have this theory that kids are growing up with a lot more because of their access to the internet and access to people's lives, that they are going to have a lot more entrepreneurial tendencies. And I wonder if they, like what they have picked up from you in your journey, if that's something that they seem to be gravitating towards.
First, I think your theory is right. I know, there's a reason that Shark Tank is such a popular show, even among kids. But what I think is great with my personal experiences, they see me being so invested in something I feel passionate about, and the fact that our business is mission oriented towards changing something that we felt was broken in culture, that they get it and they're inspired by it, and they are seeing the sacrifices that I'm making, which sometimes have to do with them, missing a sporting event or having to travel, and they're okay with it. And I think that having a strong role model in a parent is a really powerful way to parent, even if you're not with them. They are seeing your success and your failures and how you can continue to grow as a human. And I think that's been a really rewarding part of being an entrepreneur, is how that my kids have been able to absorb what that means.
I'm inspired so much by that. And a lot of what I do on the side, I hope someday my kids will listen to this crap and think, hey, I understand why my mom after bedtime is sitting in her closet talking to some person on her laptop,
Right.
I hope someday they can understand, because they are so young at the moment. I wonder if you have any thoughts or advice for maybe a mom or dad out there who does have a passion for a mission, or has a passion for an idea and just can't quite take that step to start. Do you have any thoughts or advice for those people to kind of get over the hump of maybe it's fear or just the unknown, and to kind of put their feet to the ground and get going?
Yeah, I'm a real proponent of sharing the idea. And you can kind of think of these ideas as little weather fronts or little hurricanes. And as you share the idea and, you introduce it to, new weather, it kind of fuels it, and it gets bigger and bigger as you get more people's input into it. And so I think there can be a tendency to like, oh, I've got a great idea, I'm going to hide it, or I feel so passionate about it, it's scary to share it because I don't want people to think it's dumb. But I would suggest getting your idea out there is really scary, but it's the most important thing you can do. Share it with friends, share it with advisors. It'll give the idea fuel, and it'll give you motivation to fine tune it and to decide whether you want to move forward with it. But I think that would be my first thing. Share the idea, have confidence, because by sharing it, you're going to be able to make it stronger.
Good idea. So if anybody's listening and you have an idea you've been sitting on, my homework for you is to share it with 5 people this week.
Great.
Just tell people about it and see what their feedback is. I bet it'll be positive, especially if you're so passionate about it. I think that usually comes across really well. Let's talk about shifting mindset wise from parenting young children to the teenage years. And you've kind of touched on it a little bit about how you feel that the teenage years are arguably a little bit easier, a little bit more interesting. For those who are still stuck in those toddler times, think back to those years with your 2 kids, and what were some of the toughest moments that you had?
I think it's funny that those tough moments for me were more on the social front. If I felt my kids weren't comfortable in social situations or had friend challenges, those are the ones that always broke my heart as a parent. And those are the ones that you really can do very little about. So maybe that is why those were the ones that really got to me, because they're going to learn through their interactions, and those relationships are their own. And I think that is a big transition from when they're little to when they start having their own friendships or relationships with teachers, coaches. And I think it's really important that they do have them and that they're responsible for those relationships and that you're modeling good behavior. I think that's one of the hardest things as a parent, for sure.
I'm starting to feel that already. And in a previous episode, I talked about feeling a little bit of loss of control. And so my oldest, he's in first grade, so we just started reading this year. And I was very excited about that milestone. It was just, I'm just so freaking proud whenever he sits down with a book and he just loves it. But then I realized I just lost a little control with that, where now his whole world, he has access to it and he is seeing things and understanding things and reading things that I was able to shelter him from before. And now I'm having to answer tough questions, or he's just being introduced to concepts that I'd never had to worry about before. And it just kind of suddenly, it was like a light switch where I was like, oh yeah, this is the start. This is the start of these big life concepts where I don't have any control over how it impacts him. And it is a little scary for sure.
And it's hard, I think, not to be judgmental about the kind of things that they're reading and consuming. Like every morning, my daughter for years has read the comics and then the Dear Abby, advice. I mean, since she could read. And a lot of the stuff that surfaces in those newspaper advice columns are not 5-year-old appropriate, but she was a precocious reader. And I didn't want to, pass judgment, although frankly, I'm like the most judgy person. And so it's something I had to contain in myself and kind of talk her through it. So she would tell me about something she read in the column, and it was, maybe salacious or who knows what it was. And I'd have to kind of talk her through it. Well, what do you think about that? And do you think that was good advice? But I think loss of control and then imposing your own value set, which you want to do on some things. But if they're into true crime and it's not your thing, reading is reading. And I think especially in that, like let them choose and they'll find their way through it.
What do you think is coming up for you as a mom and as your business is growing? And I want to chat a little bit more about some of the exciting things that have recently happened with Mamava, but how do you think this is going? How does this look in the next few years as your kids start nearing the end of their high school age and they start heading off to college and your business continues to grow? What do you think the future looks for you as a mom?
Well, I'm really excited in a way to, once again, for that phase of life to be learning, from what they get to learn when they go off to school. And I'm frankly excited to be reconnecting with my husband because the kids are that constant experience. And I want to be able to reconnect with him and do some of the things that we haven't been able to do because the kids do consume so much time as my husband is a coach and they are off to their activities and obviously we're connecting with them as they navigate school. And with that, hopefully some freedom that includes the business. So maybe if there's business travel, we can do it together. I have done that a few times with my kids, actually bringing them on some trips where I was at a conference or presenting, and that has been amazing because of everybody's busy schedule. It hasn't happened as much as I would like it to, and I know both kids are really interested in doing more of that. So I hope to do more of that as the business, as I said, becomes a teenager. I think it's really appropriate for my teenagers to be participating in it even, and maybe doing a little what you would be considering intern work, like go clean up that database. I mean, they haven't done that yet, but there's, I think, certainly an opportunity for them actually even to engage directly in the business.
That is so amazing. They're going to love that. I think that's a great opportunity for them. That's amazing.
I think it's fun for us, once again, just because the business is kind of fun and funny. It's about breasts and breastfeeding, and people could get a chuckle out of that, especially teenagers. But my kids have been around it, so they don't, see it that way at all, which is great to have young people that are exposed to this and so confident about the subject is really rewarding.
As a side note, I feel like young people are so much more mature than we ever were when we were that age. It's incredible. Do you feel the same way?
Especially about gender issues and sexual identity. My kids understand more and are more sensitive to all of that. And that's a clear place where I'm being educated all the time on gender orientation and non-binariness and all of the different ways that kids understand sexuality now, which as I was growing up, that sort of didn't exist.
That's great. It's always good to be learning from your kids. I mean, what an interesting. I'm kind of just getting really excited for my kids to hit that age because I can't even imagine the things that they're going to come home and start. I feel like I'm still with it mostly and cool and hip to a certain degree, and then I feel like it's going to be all gone in a few years, and they're going to have to keep educating me and keep me in the loop with everything.
And that goes back, I think, also to the access they have via the screens, because although unfortunately we live in a really homogeneous, at least ethnically, the state of Vermont has very little diversity. We have some socioeconomic diversity. They see people from around the world. The people they are consuming on their screens are from all around the world. They are completely diverse. And I think that is one of there's not that many positive things, but that's one of the positive things. It makes them very open and not judgmental about people who are different from them.
All right, let's jump into some of the new milestones that Mamava has hit. I wanted to chat about your new partnership with Medela. I saw that. So why don't you just share a little bit about, some recent successes with Mamava and what you guys are planning for the future?
Yeah, great. So we are almost at 800 units across the country.
Describe these units for the listeners if they don't.
Sure. Yeah. So we developed this freestanding lactation suite from a personal experience where when we needed to use our breast pumps when we were traveling as business ladies, there was just no other place to do that, privately besides frankly, a restroom. So making food in a place designed for the exact opposite function. So we designed a space specifically for pumping or breastfeeding. And we started out in airports, but soon realized that they were really needed anywhere moms work or go. So we have them in stadiums and hospitals and schools and military bases. We also have a mobile app that allows moms to find our units, actually open some of them that have a smart lock. And the mobile app includes about 3,000 other crowdsourced lactation rooms. So it's not just those 800 units that are Mamava, but there are lactation rooms all across the country. So the mission is really about supporting choice in breastfeeding and knowing that moms have all sorts of different styles and how they want to be either breastfeeding with their babies or obviously having to use a breast pump and all the logistics involved with that. So we're excited about the scale and the fact that we've moved beyond the airports to basically any place mom might need one. And the Medela connection was amazing because Medela is, we call it, they're the mothership of all things pumping and breastfeeding, have wonderful support tools for mom, have the best in class products in terms of breast pumps and accessories. And now we're offering Medela, what you'd call hospital grade pumps, to be integrated with our pods. So a private business who wants to support their employee moms who are breastfeeding can actually get one of our pods and then put a hospital grade pump in it. So the moms who work there, all they have to do is have their kit of parts and they don't have to have a breast pump. And of course, the hospital grade breast pump that Medela makes is allowing you to be way more efficient, and the overall experience is great. So we love Medela because of, they are a well-established company. they have put so much rigor and science behind their products. So it's kind of a fun combination of, a company that makes medical devices, which are highly regulated, and then us, like an upstart company who just invented something and started placing them. I think we really complement each other, which it's been really fun to work with them.
Well, I know it has been such a fun journey to watch you guys grow. And so I saw that announcement and I was like, yay, that's so big. So I was so thrilled for you guys.
Thank you. They're a wonderful organization. And as I said, we just kind of complement each other in terms of our strengths.
And what's next for Mamava? What's on your roadmap?
Well, we are soon going to be announcing a pilot program with a really big retailer. So we have not cracked through the retail world, meaning, department stores or restaurants and places like that. And obviously that would make a lot of sense for moms, both the people who work at places like that, moms who work at big retailers, but also because there's so many of them and it would create this amazing convenience for the mom if all of a sudden, whoa, there's 5,000 of those across the country. I think we can always find a lactation pod. That would be amazing. So we're doing a pilot, and that is going to be exciting. I can't quite announce it yet, but we will share it as soon as we can. And I think it'll make a really big impact because it'll just provide more access for lactation spaces for moms.
I love it. Okay, so for all my listeners, where can they find more information about Mamava and where can they download your app?
They can download our app. It's on Google and on Apple, but you can link through everything you should ever need to know about Mamava at mamava.com, MAMAVA.com. Links you through to the app. We also have a wonderful tool for those moms who might be wondering about the legislation in their city or state and what rights they have as breastfeeding moms. That is a very popular tool that is on our website. You can dial into your specific state, and we have some of the big cities that have legislation like New York and San Francisco and Philadelphia, to kind of arm yourself for that conversation with maybe an employer that maybe is not already providing lactation spaces. And in general, the website is a great resource, both for employers who might be looking to solve the problem with spaces, but also moms, everything you need to know about traveling with breast milk. So all sorts of content that I think could be helpful. So I definitely encourage. And we also love to stay in touch on Facebook and Instagram. So you can link through all of our social media platforms via the website.
Perfect. I will link up everything in the show notes. And I also have a blog post that kind of addresses what you were talking about. I wrote a post around heading back to work and the type of conversations you should have ahead of time with your boss or your management to, get everybody on the same page on what to expect when you come back, as well as setting an appropriate schedule whenever you do get back so you have time to pump and get everything done. So I'll link that up in the show notes as well. So Sascha, thank you so much for coming. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for catching up and for continuing to be a friend of Mamava.
A big thank you to Sascha for joining me today. If you head to thisisparentingpodcast.com, I've linked out to mamava.com as well as my blog post about how to successfully return to work after having a baby. If you've been to a city or an airport that has had a Mamava pod, let me know about it. Share your pics or leave a comment on how the pod made your life easier as a mom on the go. And don't forget to leave a rating and review. Bye!